Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, as they say from the Truman Show. How are you, Matt Brevner from the Void in what's that, 4K it looks like?
Good morning from the 4K BC Void. No, we covered it all now.
Exactly. Wednesday today. Thanks for everybody for watching and tuning in on rebelnews.com, Rumble, YouTube, Odyssey, and Super U. Of course, as usual, we will do a few segments on the show that are YouTube safe because they are tyrants, and then we will move on to the safer planetary systems of the other alternate platforms where you can talk about real things. We'll also be
real life.
Yeah, exactly. And like I got the white background. It's the yin and the yang here. It looks like. We'll take your paid chats on Rumble, Rumble Rants, Odyssey, Hyper Chats, and Super U paid chats. We'll read them on air. Feel free to disagree, agree, question us, criticize us, ask us, why haven't you been doing this and why haven't you been doing that, and everything else you want to ask Matt Brevner about his hit song, More of Us. Upwards of 300,000 views, I think, on YouTube now, Matt Brevner. Give everybody an update on how it's been going with the song. Obviously, people should know by now that you weren't allowed to make ads for it on YouTube. Give everybody an update about everything that's happened with the song.
It's been spreading a lot further than I had imagined or could have hoped, and basically all of the major platforms have blocked any form of advertisement. And people may ask, well, what do you mean advertisement? Why would you advertise a song? Well, that's basically how it works. It's like industry standard. That's how you get the word out there. But yeah, it's been all of that's been blocked, and it's still been shared globally, which is just crazy to me and super humbling. And it's done a lot better than I could have imagined. So, and all the kind messages from people in the Vancouver kind of freedom scene, and even globally, it's taken legs of its own. So yeah, it's been quite a ride the last couple of weeks.
I've heard that some politician in in Italy has been using your song at rallies. I don't know if we can get a clip of that or if there is footage of that, but this is what I've heard. Is this true? Do we know the guy's name? Or
yeah, there's a live streaming of it. His name is, I'm probably going to butcher this, but it's Gianluigi Paragone. So I'm sorry for butchering it, but he's a prime ministerial candidate in Italy. They have a federal election coming up very soon, and he's freedom-minded against all of the coercion and et cetera of the things that we can't talk about on this platform. But everyone, I'm assuming most people watching this show would be in agreement with. But somehow he caught wind of it, and he's been playing the song at his rallies and his events, and I've been getting all sorts of fans from Italy and new people, which is just so cool because it's just like, it's living in Vancouver. It's very on board with everything that's happening right now. And if in fact people, it seems, are clamoring for more rules and regulation and pats on the head from our big brother. So it's I get a little bit of a reprieve because obviously being a rebel, I get to chat with my friends, my fellow rebels, and we can just crack jokes about how crazy the world's getting on a daily basis. But a lot of people in Vancouver don't really have that rest. So it's nice to know that, there's people outside of, just our circle that feel this way. I mean, that's obvious, but, the world likes to tell you that it's not that way. And, any screen you look at these days will tell you that it's not that way. So it's been very encouraging.
Well, as we see there, British Columbia wanting to extend restrictions, we'll get to more later about the rest of the world moving on, it seems. I don't trust any of it, especially not the British government, but I think it's for election's sake, but we'll get to that more with Lewis Brackpool, who's going to join us in about 15 minutes' time. Our top story here, the first one we want to get to is about Jagmeet Singh, federal leader for the New Democratic Party here in Canada. He got a sponsorship for a chair. Jagmeet Singh and his wife have realized their error, will pay $18.95 rocking chair gift, meaning a lawyer told them you can't do this, is my guess. So they got this fancy chair that cost $2,000, and they said, no, we don't want to pay for it. We'll just, do a sponsored post, which is probably not something somebody who's trying to be prime minister should be doing. How I'm spending my time these days. I have a new partner spending time with. That's probably not even a baby there. It's probably a doll for this photo op. Poor Jagmeet is what I want to say. Now, people who are familiar with Jagmeet in the political circles, I'm told that Jagmeet's not too serious of a guy, that he's a fun guy, and that he's not even that political. Drives around in fancy cars. He's a playboy is the word that we always hear used about Jagmeet, is that he just goes around in fancy cars. He's showing up to the parties. He's doing all that cool guy stuff. He showed up to a Ben Bankus stand-up comedy once. You can find that on his YouTube channel, on Ben's YouTube channel, where Jagmeet showed up to hear him make fun of him. So I don't think Jagmeet's really that serious about everything. He sort of just goes with the wind. I always wonder, how does Jagmeet square his views with his faith? Now, I'm not about to tell somebody about how they should practice their religion, but there seems to be obvious things about socialism and extreme progressivism that do not coincide, or they wouldn't seem like they'd be able to coexist with, a conservative Sikh, just as they wouldn't coexist with a conservative Muslim or Christian, that being like, transgenderism and basically communism. And I've never seen anybody question him on that, and I'd like to hear his answers on that. Any thoughts on a federal leader taking sponsorships like this, Matt?
Well, the first thing I thought when I read the article was it was just kind of funny, because it's like, yeah, Jagmeet and his wife, they're social media influencers. They're not politicians. Like, so obviously they're going to take a $2,000 chair and like, if you're going to post something, you're going to not forget to tag the person who gave you the chair. So I think it's just like an interesting moment. It's like a gotcha moment, because it's kind of like technology and contemporary, the contemporary puppet show popularity contest of politics, colliding with the old guard. Because if you read down to the CBC article, it says, well, if he's found guilty of taking gifts that he's not supposed to take, it's a $500 fine. It's like, well, the chair is $1,800. So how often does that happen? But it's just like, yeah, if someone gives you a gift, 10 years ago, they didn't have Instagram to tag people for their gifts. But I mean, yeah, he's a social media influencer. So what else would we expect? At least he's being transparent. We don't get to see who's paying for lobbying for whatever other initiatives are being forced upon us as sound and reasonable, but really are just sponsored posts, sponsored bills, sponsored initiatives. So at least this way we know. But for me, I just thought it was kind of funny. I honestly don't really see the problem with it, because I mean, I understand politics.
They've gotten to
a pay to play. It's all pay to play anyways. So at least it's like, well, yeah, man, nice chair. At least you're transparent.
Well, I don't think he really wants to be a real politician in the sense, like, you're right, he's a social media influencer the same way AOC. I don't think AOC gets on Instagram Live to talk to people in the terms of informing them of policy. She gets on there because she likes the attention. I mean, she's a theater person from college, the same way Justin Trudeau is. They didn't really get in. I don't think they got into this stuff to change the world. They just got into it because it's a good thing to do and it makes them look good and feel good. Justin Trudeau was a teacher, and, he's basically gifted this position as the leader of a party. AOC was a bartender, and she's gifted this position of running for Congress. And if you're familiar with the backstory of AOC, she used to have this guy that wrote all her policy for her, and this guy was part of a team where they went out and they looked for a person to be their talking head, and AOC basically won the role. For lack of a better term, she was the person they chose to become the speaker of their ideas, and he was her policy writer. I believe he wrote speeches as well. He helped her do the Green New Deal, which of course was a colossal failure because it's terrible. Probably would pass in Canada. Having said that, once he left her, she pretty much did away with any real ideas. I don't think AOC does really anything anymore other than be a talking head, trying to say everybody wants to sleep with her and she's a celebrity, and she doesn't really do anything politically, so to speak. She had her sit in, like, stupid stuff like that. But my point is, she can't come up with anything on her own without this guy. I don't think Jagmeet's coming up with anything on his own at all. I can't remember the last idea he had other than during the lockdowns. He said more lockdowns, stricter lockdowns, more government money being shelled out. Jagmeet's never going to win.
I don't think he wants to. You know, like, why win? He's in a perfect situation right now, right? He's minority leader. He can just inform policy. He can make all of these promises, which are just further left of what the Liberals can do, without any sort of responsibility or liability or culpability, because he'll never be in office. He'll never be able to do it. So he can just say, hey, the Liberals are doing it wrong. We would be more progressive. We would give you more money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then younger people are like, yeah, he's great. But he's never, ever, ever going to win. So he's never going to be accountable to his ideas. It's actually brilliant. You know, because if they want any more seats, they're actually a threat. And then who knows, maybe that house of cards would crumble. But
it's just
I don't
weird
know.
to me that none of these people have to be responsible in their parties for constantly losing. Like, they constantly lose. Democrats constantly lose, and they fall upwards somehow. You can, like Kamala Harris. She couldn't make it past the first round of the primaries. Elevated to vice president for no reason. Stuff like that. Stacey Abrams in Georgia lost. Never accepted her loss. They elevate her. Beto O'Rourke. They elevate the losers who are the most crazy, and then they do the George Soros thing, which is have an even crazier person run against them. So either you get the crazier person you want, or by juxtaposition, you make the other person that you already put in seem less insane, which is a shifting over the Overton window that happens a lot in Canada. It happened the last 2 years where the Conservative Party, whether they were like this before, but they certainly now have cemented themselves as, you know, liberal light or conservative light, whichever way you want to put it, where 95% of their policies are the same. But, no, you better not add too many guns to that gun ban list. I don't see any other thing that the Conservative Party actually stands for that's different from the Liberals. But I digress. Speaking of how bad Canada is, we've got a misery index that we've ranked on, and we're pretty high up on it, I believe. It's from the Fraser Institute, and that's a conservative-leaning, would we call it a think tank, producer Andrew? We would, producer Andrew. Yeah, there's so many Andrews here. If you didn't know, there's also a third Andrew that works at the office. The misery index returns from the Fraser Institute. I don't know if that graph is actually indicative of something or just a graphic. The misery index, a combination of inflation and unemployment rates created by economist Arthur Oken, is resurfacing as a measure of interest across developed countries as inflation rates increase and unemployment remains relatively high. Canada suffered from inflation rates that were routinely above 4% up until 1992, when the Bank of Canada was finally able to bring the inflation under control. Canadians have enjoyed low inflation rates up to 2020. In 2021, increased markedly and are expected to remain at their current level through this year. Many argue current inflation rates are transitory, meaning that they are short-term in nature, which of course they are not. And the highlighted part down here is this results in Canada having the 6th worst misery index score. Even the word misery index is sad. 35 countries and we're 6th worst. Is there anywhere where we can find the full list of countries? I'd like to see who we're worse off than. Transitory inflation, Matt Brevner. It's the same thing they always say when they want you to not be worried about losing all your money. Oh, it's just how the global economy works. There's ebbs and flows. There's bound to be recessions and bounce backs. But I say if you have better policy, this is less likely to happen. Now, they'll still go ahead, and they've done this, and say that their employment rates are the highest they've ever been, the highest job creation there's ever been, which, of course, after you eliminate tons of jobs, you're going to get a high an average amount of creation is going to look much better than it would have been previously. But I am not for this whole story about how, you know, this is just how it happens. The housing market just crashes, you know, inflation just rises all the time, and here we are. And we'll get your thoughts on this, Matt. Spain, Greece, Italy, Iceland is miserable, Sweden. I thought Scandinavia was supposed to be the best place in the world.
Isn't that what we're trying to be? Isn't that what we're modeling all of our policies after? Isn't that what the United States is aspiring to be? I think the misery index, it doesn't the numbers that are contributing to the misery index do not necessarily equate to real life, what it's like to be a 20-something, 30-something, 40-something in a major city in Canada. But something that is accurate about that is the name misery index. If you speak to a lot of people around our age in Canada, they're quite miserable. Whether they're vaccinated or not vaccinated or whatever else, never mind government overreach. It's basically impossible to buy a house. Like I read in the Calgary housing market currently, because it's on fire because people from BC and Toronto can't afford to buy in BC and Toronto or Ontario. So they're taking all of this cheap money and they're going to Alberta because taxes are lower. There's lots of job creation. But apparently Alberta currently, the Calgary market only has, and someone can maybe update this in the comments, but a half month's inventory currently. Now, to put this in perspective, a typical housing market would have between 8 months and a year of inventory. So for a bidding wars to be going on in Calgary, which has been traditionally over the last 20 years a highly recessed market, like that's legitimately a housing crisis, not just as like a buzzword. It's legitimately a housing crisis, and that's in Calgary. And with us bringing in 400,000 immigrants, which I think is great, but you can't be daft to how that's going to further affect the economy and the housing market. It's very strange. Tiff Macklem from the Fed has basically backed us into this corner where we've been hyperinflating, printing money like crazy with quantitative easing over the pandemic. And now it's kind of like the gas pedal is broken, because once you raise the gas pedal or even raise basis points, 3 points, there's going to be mass layoffs in the corporate sector. People are going to lose their homes. So we almost have to keep printing money. And it's like, I don't know how this ends or how this stops, but it's not looking good, guys. It's really not.
That's one way to put it. Not looking good. I would like to see something different than our mass immigration influx that happens every single year. Another thing conservatives don't have a different opinion on. People will say, we need it because our economy needs to grow and our negative population growth. But I say, let it happen with just far less. I'm thinking, I'd go with zero. Not like absolute zero, but take it down to a point where it's only people who are working, that sort of thing, as opposed to this mass influx every year. Why? Because I think wages will go up. I think cost of living will go down. I think job availability will go up. And I think there's a whole whack of things that we've never tried that I think that are worth trying in a time where our country has no money and there doesn't seem to be any way out of it. Try the thing that might create better a better job market and higher wages, and let's see if it works for a couple of years. Now, having said that, there is also the problem of people not wanting to work. Much bigger problem in America than what we see here, but there are places in America right now where you can get paid $18 to work at a fast food restaurant or Walmart, and the cost of living is still much lower than it is here. I know writer Dave likes to talk about Knox, Tennessee, because that's where the wrestler Kane is the mayor of, if you recall him. And then there's places in Texas as well, getting paid $18 an hour to do an entry-level job because there aren't enough people to work. Why is there not enough people to work? Because they pay them to sit at home. Now, do people deserve to be paid to sit at home because they were locked down? Maybe. If the government's going to take your money anyway, you might as well get some of it back. Sure. But in places like these in the United States where they aren't locked down any longer, but they still can collect, the federal subsidy, we'll call it a subsidy, of, the COVID dollars, whatever. I forget what they called it in the stimulus checks, they call it in the United States, where they're still able to collect these things federally. They don't want to go back to work, and it's a big problem. Now in Canada, I'm sure that's a thing too. There are lots of low-level jobs, but instead of getting people to increase the wages at these locations, they want to artificially heighten the minimum wage for the people who are already working there. And then what do you end up with? You end up with automated machines at Walmart. You end up with automated kiosks at McDonald's and all this stuff that doesn't create actual new jobs for people. You raise the bottom line for the companies of people who are already working there, and then you flood it in with, immigrants who may or may not have a job to go to because it's already been taken by a machine or another person. So where do these people go? I don't know. Justin Trudeau's immigration policy is stolen from his father. His father changed it around way back in the day, where he changed it. He said there's too many European immigrants coming. It was like 70-30, I believe. And he didn't even it out, he just reversed it. So it's way more from poorer countries. So I don't know how that's fair and equal. It seems more like a revenge tactic, which is a very progressive thing to do. But my point is that the immigration's policies that we have right now clearly do not work. We have cultural pockets, for better or for worse, where people don't interact that much. You go to places in Toronto where the signs are in Chinese, they're in Mandarin, which is fine if you want to have that as a sign on the side. But when your main thing, like, that's where I'm with Quebec on that one, like your main sign is in a different language that isn't an official language here, it starts to be really odd. And I'm not for, cultural and ethnic enclaves. I don't happen to care if my neighbor is, Chinese or black or white. It's just that it creates these pockets of division. Now all of a sudden you have one section where it's just like you have only Sikh candidates, or another section where you only have only Chinese candidates for government, or you only have this, that, and the other. I don't like things being based on ethnic, cultural religions when we're supposed to live in a country that isn't supposed to be represented that way. And I think the immigration policy creates this problem inherently, because we never say you're moving to the Arctic if you want to come to this country. You're going to Nunavut and you're going to make that place prosper. No, it's flood everybody into one place, drive properties way up, and it's all in like the GTA and the greater Vancouver area. And now that people are being forced to flee somewhere, they're going to Calgary, and it sounds like making it worse. I mean, from an economic standpoint.
Yeah, it seems that way. I don't really I can't speak on the American situation. I don't know enough about it. As for the Canadian situation, I'm not beyond correction, but it doesn't make sense to me how, if our medical system or healthcare system is so strained that we need to literally chastise people and berate them to avoid them from potentially getting sick. Okay, so we're going to bring in 400,000 non-skilled workers, and that's going to make the situation better. Or if we have like a half month's inventory in housing in major markets, okay, so where are these people going to live? We can't get people back to work for low-paying jobs, like entry-level jobs, like food sector, for example, because we're paying them CERB, and now they don't want to work. And so, well, just raise minimum wage so they want to work. Okay, well, then restaurants have to raise their expenses, and then ultimately us, who are, we all took, what was it, a 4 to 7% pay cut because of inflation over this last year. The buck just gets passed back to us anyway. So, like, where does this, all of it's like these things all sound pretty, but they're short-sighted, I find. That's my opinion.
It's very disappointed to see a working class of people, that being Canadians 40, 50 and over, who worked their whole lives, and now they don't seem to notice, like, everything slipping away that was around, that they had the benefit of being around when they were younger. And they're just saying, no, govern us more. And of course it's not everybody, but it's govern us more. We're all in this together. Meanwhile, everything gets slowly ruined. Inflation, nobody's buying new houses. They bring in foreign investors, and they say, oh, now there's a problem. It's like this weird parallelism where, like, I disagree with everything the media says, and all these politicians lie to me, but then you close the door and you open it on the other side, and it's like, oh, these politicians care about me. Oh, these media companies actually care about me and are telling them the truth. They wouldn't lie to me about this. And I just wonder, like, you ever see something where somebody, it's a person who doesn't believe the media or anything, but then they send you a post from, guy talking to his phone says he has a military contact that says they're killing people with 5G, which is a segment we're going to get to. And it's like, you don't trust anything, but you trust random guy who has no actual sources. It's a big problem I see. And when people talk about, like, boomerism, it's not the actual age group. It's the mindset of, some politician's going to rescue me, and this is all just going to work itself out in some sort of, like, libertarian sense of, we don't actually have to do anything. We just have to, speak loudly and things are going to change. Whereas, like, it's still going to be this. You're still getting Doug Ford to win this
Right.
this summer.
I think you have to be very desperate and afraid to still trust the institutions. I think across the board, Trumpism kind of exposed the frailty of the institutions and public trust in that, and the pandemic season globally, I think, just hammered that home for everybody. But speaking of which, I think we have our mate Louis Brackpool across the pond. I want to know more about these pandemic measures going on over on that side and see how he feels about all this. We got him on the line, right?
Do we want to cut away from YouTube before we join? Oh, God, he's here already. Oh, no.
I'm here already, mate.
Buddy, what time is it there? 5:30, Lewis?
It is 5:23 on the dot.
And what's the exact town or city you're in?
I am in Arundel, it is called. It's a nice southern coast part of England, so pretty out of the way from metropolitan London, so that's quite nice.
I think that's actually a place from Lord of the Rings, but I won't press you on that. Lewis, we're getting a lot of word that England and Scotland now are removing restrictions. I believe in England it's called Plan A, which is a weird thing. We're going back to Plan A, the first plan. But give us an update on how everything's going there. We've got this article by you. Mask mandates vaccine passports to end in England. Give the people what they want to hear.
Sure. So Boris has announced that he is scrapping Plan B, which the measures include forced mask mandates on public transport and restaurants and shops, etc., etc. He's also removing the requirement of a vaccine passport, which is interesting. And he's also talking about just removing this stay-at-home for work legislation as well, which I find interesting because the one thing that we have been campaigning as well about is, of course, the national health sector, and that's, of course, the workers and the care workers that are being forced to take a vaccine, and if you do not comply with that, you lose your job. So there's nothing about removing that, unfortunately. I mean, not to, of course, dampen it down. I think it's great news. I think it's a small bit of good news. But how I see it, I don't know if you know much about what's been going on with Boris, but he's been losing a lot of Tories in his cabinet recently. They revolted against the vaccine passports, where a lot of his backbenchers went against him and voted to be against a lot of the measures that he's put in place. And because he's lost a lot of votes of confidence in the polls, it seems as though that this has been pushed out as to try and win back his backbenchers almost. So I don't know, you can take that in one of two ways. You can take it as it's a form of desperation that, you can see him slipping in the polls. You can see he's not doing very well. He's not got the public on his side almost. And it's sort of an act to sort of get everyone together again and try and unite his party, because we've had some defectors. A lot of people are planning to defect as well. Sources have told me, apparently, but take that as you will. And I don't know. I think it's a kind of act of a little celebration, but there's still lots of work to be done.
Two questions for you, Lewis, then I'll turn it over to Matt Brevner here. First of all, what kind of numbers are you talking about when you say some of the backbenchers turned on him? How many people, how many seats do they have versus how many people who are voting against this? And then my second question is, why do you think he's doing it? Is it just because, the polls are turning on him, his political partners are turning on him? Or do you think it's, some sort of different plan where you're just going to end up being locked down again?
Sure. So firstly, with the vaccine passports, when the vote came through in December time, Boris had a vote where 126 Tory voters went against his plan of the vaccine passports, which is a huge number. And then after pushing that through, he lost a lot of confidence within his party. There have been over 56, I believe, from what I saw last night, that put a letter through of no confidence, and that showed that he's not destined to lead the party anymore. They've lost the confidence in him. I believe it's a big majority government for the Conservative Party anyway, with a lot of members, over 300, I believe, whilst Labour has over 200, or I think just a little bit less. So even though it doesn't sound like much, I think you need over about 15% to sign a letter of no confidence for that to go through. So it's kind of, I think he's going to contest that as well, which I think is very important, because it shows that he's not willing to back down, which is very interesting, to say the least. But What was your second question
Do you
again,
think
Andrew? Sorry
Do you
about
think this is because of polling and because of turmoil in the party, or do you think that, it's one of those situations where we're going to see these restrictions pulled back only for whatever powers that be to reinforce them in, 2 months' time? Do you think this is just a political move?
I think it's political theatre mostly. I think, look, all the scandals coming out about them, having Christmas parties and parties all the way round the year when the restrictions were so high and people couldn't see family members. I mean, personally, I think it's one big distraction now to talk about it because, it's a year later from now and that's all they want to bring up in the news now. So, but I think, it's political theatre, how I see it. Some moves there from Boris, as you can see. But I think it's majority political theatre. I think he's really losing the vote with his own party. I think his party and him are in a massive part of turmoil at the minute. So I think it's his way of trying to win back these backbenchers. I don't think they could have done this a while ago now when they found out that Omicron was mild and all the facts and figures around Omicron. They could have done that easily, but clearly he's chosen not to, and he's only doing it now because the polls are not in favour of him, and all of a sudden he could possibly be out the door. So it only speaks sense in my mind that it's an act of desperation, is how I see it.
Matt,
I could be wrong.
Was there anything mentioned about international travel coming in?
As far as I'm aware, I think the only thing that they mentioned as well is a hint on scrapping self-isolation. So if you test positive and you self-isolate, but I think they're looking to either renew it or not renew it in March, but he's hinted on not renewing it. But obviously hinting, what's that to go by? We've seen how governments have worked, not only in England or the UK and Canada as well. A lot of U-turning, a lot of back and forth. So I can't take that. You have to take that with a massive pinch of salt. For travelling, I'm not 100% sure, so I best not make any claims just in case the fact checkers get onto me and start calling me out.
It seems people are so desperate for a sense of normality that a politician can even allude to, hey, maybe things will kind of go back to sort of normal one day. Still trust me, and that might be enough for people.
Well, this is it. This is it. It's an act of desperation. That's how I see it anyway. It's an act of desperation.
Yeah. We had an opportunity, like you said, with Omicron to at least pump the brakes a little bit, but it seems that the opposite is happening. At least in Canada, it's been very troubling to see what's been going on, but I appreciate the insight from the UK.
All right, I think it's time for us to pull. Sorry, Lewis, we need to pull away from YouTube. We've given them too much.
Right.
We want you to stick around though, because we want to ask you about one of your latest videos, and of course, what really happened with Princess Diana. So let's bring up the rebelnewsstore.com while we transition away from YouTube. You can always go to Rebel News. Wow, really, that's how you offended an English person right there. Rebelnewsstore.com is where you can get shirts like that, one of our best sellers, Stars in His Eyes. My favorite toque or beanie, whatever you call them in England, I'm not sure. Australian closed. I'm not even sure what that means. But if you want to join us on the other platforms, rebelnews.com/live streams, you can find the latest link. We're going over to Rumble, Super U, and Odyssey. You can read your paid chats on air there. Lewis is dying right now. I'm not sure why.
I don't know. I think it's